Hi, this is David Vincent from Morbid Angel, and you are listening to Requiem Metal Podcast.
We just heard Ablaze from Terror Propaganda from 2002 by the nihilistic group that is known as Craft. This is the Requiem Metal Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And it's very appropriate, Mark, because today.
11/11/11.
Well, not only National Metal Day, but also the fact that
There's a lot of end of the world crazies with their numerology for 11/11/11.
Well, this is very soul cleansing for me because tonight I was forced to confront Jesus Christ Superstar, one of the college productions of
the Andrew Lloyd Webber Classic.
Yes, college is near us. And here's what I can tell you about the music that I heard tonight. It was sort of like a combination of kind of like bad psychedelic, mixed with like goblin outtakes, with a hint of kind of bad German prog thrown in for good mix. And it felt like the whitest like Christian rock concert I could like have been to. So, but a family member of mine was in the production, so I felt obligated to at least.
Then next week we're gonna see Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Yes, exactly. But we're gonna cleanse the palate with Jesus Christ Superstar with not only nihilistic black metal tonight, but tomorrow Judas Priest.
Yes, that'll be good.
Judas Priest, Thin Lizzy, and apparently a whole bunch of pinch harmonics, which is.
Black Label Society. We're both kind of novices when it comes to Zach Wild and kind of want to keep it that way.
Yeah, I've never heard an entire Black Label Society song. I think I may have heard a snippet. Part
of a song off Mafia, I think. The record, I was working at the record store at the time, but I prefer his Ozzy live stuff that we see on VH1 Classic.
I just want to imagine pinch harmonics. That's it. Just nothing but pinch.
And he looks tough, so
we'll hear some pinch harmonics tonight, actually, or today, or tonight, or in the middle of the night,
whenever you're listening
to this. But this is a band that we've sort of lobbied around for a while, and having gotten a hold of Void, their brand new record recently, that kind of was the impetus to sort of finally push us to do this. And we've done some of the bigger black metal bands, Mayhems and Immortals and
Darkthrones and Burzum,
stuff like that. And that's great. But we coming off a big epic 2-parter like Voivod with a guest star with Jeff, which was awesome, and we hope you guys enjoyed all that. It was kind of like take it back to something a little bit more roots oriented, a little more stripped down in a way, but also
something a little more underground too.
I was gonna say something that like
people really
doesn't have as much like expectation, or might throw like a curveball. I mean, like in conversing with Jeff a little bit, like from his perspective as a fan, because he likes the podcast a little bit, it was cool to hear him sort of geek out about the fact that we actually devoted a show to Eucharist, which and that's just a kind of an example, or our Tonelli Jarva show, like which most people like wouldn't even understand that.
Yeah,
but like to us, like why wouldn't we do a Eucharist show, kind of thing. So I feel like the same way kind of about Craft. This is a band, like I guess you and I were chatting before this, that we discovered when Decibel released that top 100 records of the 2000s, kind of
a couple years ago, I think.
Yeah, it was the greatest metal albums of the decade, and it was cool because I read about a lot of both of us read about bands that we
just missed,
had glossed over, maybe heard the reference, and I had heard of Craft before, but all I knew is they were on Southern Lord, so I didn't know if they were. With Southern Lord, there's like a grain of salt that sometimes goes into that.
It's hit and miss because it's there's a lot of hipster stuff going on with it. There's a lot of stuff that's like the like Burning Witch and Con8 and stuff that's can be interesting in small doses, but it's nothing I want to hear an entire record of.
Yeah, I just don't have the patience anymore for some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and also unfortunately for you and I think this was a weird era, 2005, when the Fuck the Universe record had come out, because 2005 I was like second year of teaching, like I was just moving. I was very disconnected from like the record store and some of like the underground kind of scene, know. And same with you were just leaving the record store as well, kind of in that process. I think so neither of us were hip to these kind of oddball things that were coming out in that like era, but and so Craft hail from Sweden, but even though there's some tremolo stuff, some Watain moments and a few other things scattered throughout their music, you would say they're more based in almost a Norwegian or just straight Scandinavian style. It's not very specifically Swedish in the way that like Marduk or Nagelfar, those bands are
or
very
even
Swedish,
Dissection and Watain definitely have more of I think the Swedish melodic kind of flavor, but Craft is much more, I think, out of the the Darkthrone, Burzum's, Thorns kind of scene. Except the weird thing is that for being a really really kind of grim black metal band has lo-fi kind of sensibilities, the production's fucking sweet.
Oh yeah,
it's actually like a really broad, nice production, which is kind of bizarre for that kind of band. I've never really heard it done that well. And that kind of, because Darkthrone, their stuff doesn't sound like shit, but it's more of a crude production.
Yeah.
But somehow Kraft's able to actually like capture that same kind of guitar tone, but actually have a really good production throughout the whole record.
Well, and like the song we just heard, Ablaze, like, has that Darkthrone mix kind of, but like mixed in also with like the same kind of tone that you heard like on Mayhem Death Crush, but
it's all audible. Yeah.
It's very, very audible. And I think I found that kind of surprising about their first couple records, Total Soul Rape and Terror Propaganda, which we just heard a song off of, because when you look at the covers, it's black and white,
pretty stock.
It looks very lo-fi, what you would expect from like kind of demos from early Scandinavian bands or something like that.
And then I think 2004 and 2005 Moribund Records, which I didn't know existed anymore, reissued Total Soul Rape and Terror Propaganda.
I remember Moribund back in the days when
they put out like Godified
stuff. Okay.
Weird stuff. They probably put out some more like mainstream stuff, but I'm trying to think of what I have in my collection from Moribund.
Yeah.
And right now it's like Godified. Actually, they put out some of the old Behemoth.
Those
in the Pagan Vastlands and whatnot. Okay. I think they put that out. That might have just been a reissue as well for the States, but they've been kind of off the radar for a while.
Yeah, and then so I think both of us were very surprised as to, this is an era in the early 2000s when this band comes out where, I think black metal's in a pretty bad spot, on a mainstream level with
it's in the early
Cradles
stages.
And Dimmu Borgir.
Yeah, in the early stages of all the,
what's the Orthodox stuff?
The Orthodox stuff. Starting talking about Deathspell Omegas and Funeral Mists and all that kind of stuff were hitting in the...
Yeah, and it's before era. Marduk had changed over... and got Mortus from Funeral Mist, to change
Plague Angel era and all this stuff.
Yeah, and so it's like 2000, 2002. There were some great records coming out, don't get me wrong, but like of the black metal ilk, you couldn't even like Emperor had kind of grown out of black metal by that point.
Satyricon was like really stripping down, becoming like this Queens of the Stone Age.
Yeah, they were sort of going in the Volcano Rebel Extravaganza sort of mode, and so
and Immortal was off doing their own thing.
Yeah, so it was like a weird vacuumy kind of period, and so I think it opened up for bands like Deathspell Omega and Funeral Mist, and
I'm sure there's tons of other like really underground black metal stuff that was happening at the time that I just didn't.
Watain got their start during this time period too, and that kind of built their reputation and stuff. So and
Rankos came out along this time as well, Last Dissection record, which kind of shares their kind of kinship a little bit with the whole kind of ethic of Kraft, which is basically just fuck humanity. It's here's a direct quote: "Total destruction of mankind and matter." that was what the
I like the matter part because once you get everything, once you get rid of mankind, there's still stuff. There's only finite atoms left,
so destroy that as well.
Yeah, so they're not even like for the Chernobyl kind of thing, even like plants are growing in Chernobyl.
They want the vacuum of space.
Plants. Yeah, fuck everything. I love it.
So they're the true nihilist, actually.
Yeah, that's great. That must be exhausting, as Lebowski quotes. Oh my gosh, yeah, but and their lyrics reflect that, and that's one of the coolest parts about them is, you can laugh all you want about that kind of bleak attitude, but they seem to back it up in terms of like the music and
it's a refreshing change to just like, oh, hail Satan, our great dark lord kind of bullshit. They do this like the same like Dissection mixed like Eastern mythology within the destroyer of worlds and all this kind of shit, but they've also described their music as anti-cosmic Satanism.
Okay.
So I don't exactly know what anti-cosmic means.
I was going to say, I guess I'm unaware of what cosmic Satanism is to be against it to that point.
I don't know if anti. If you're cosmic, does that mean you just embrace the universe?
Yeah, so maybe.
So I guess it's fuck the universe. Anti-cosmic.
Yeah, this makes total sense. Okay, I don't know why we didn't figure this out beforehand, actually. So it's sort of like double negatives, really. Yeah. You start adding double negatives together and you get a positive, and then you get rid of stuff. Yeah. Okay, got it. So
it all equals. It all basically eliminates everything.
Exactly. Well, and when we get to Void, I pulled out a couple of awesome nihilistic lyrics that we'll share later. But that's one of the things I even reading in some of the comments and reactions to certain records, even when people said the music, and I totally disagreed with this point of view that the music was just kind of standard black metal, whatever. That they would often give the band like props or bonus stars if they're star rating something, just for how great the lyrics were. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, the music was blah, 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 you know,
which is something you usually
but I love
associate
the lyrics
with black metal is fantastic lyrics, unless it's Fenriz, Satan's poet. But
yeah. Well, tell us who's in the band though.
It's basically the kind of from their inception. They actually started out as called Nocta. Until 1998, and then changed their name to Kraft. But it's John Doe on guitars, Joachim Carlson on guitar and bass. They have a couple bass, a guy come in, I think, on Void to play bass as well. Michael, also known as Knox, N-O-X, and Daniel Holland on drums. Knox was the premier vocalist, I guess, and then they had this guy that is not necessarily a part of the band, but always came in for studio recordings to do backing vocals.
And he would do some of the sick shrieks and screams and different things that you would hear every so often. Was that Bjorn?
I'm not sure.
I know it's Bjorn on Total Soul Rape is the session vocalist.
It might be the same guy that comes in throughout, because I was reading an interview where basically they have a consistent member or a guy that comes in, but they never consider him an actual member.
Gotcha.
Of the band. And then actually in 2008, I think for some live and some studio stuff, we had Dirge Rep from Gehenna and Enslaved and a couple other bands come in to do drums. But then the Void record, which we'll talk about a little bit later, his session recording was removed, and they basically kind of scrapped the record and redid it, and then did Triggered, basically drum machine for it, which I have a really hard time believing that that people are that bent out of shape that it's a drum machine. You can't really tell.
Yeah, no, and when we get to the Void stuff, if I don't know, we'll talk about the aesthetic. Because
I'm picky about analog stuff. I'd much rather hear analog stuff than digital, but if you can't tell, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah, and nowadays
keep the vibe of the whole catalog on Void.
I mean, how many bands are doing programming of any kind? I mean, there's so much studio tweaking that happens in the recording of stuff.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I
was just watching a Thin Lizzy documentary tonight, the Alive and Dangerous live record that they put out.
Yep.
Got a bunch of crap from critics and from fans because Phil Lynott went back in and redid some of his vocal lines, redid some bass, and then some of the guitar players came back in. And I mean, Unleashed in the East was the same way. It's just like you can't get away from
Kiss
it.
Alive too, right? Had some tweaks because
sure
of Ace Frehley was kind of
coked out of his mind.
Yeah,
yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. If it sounds good, nowadays I'm not as picky as I used to be. I used to be way more true and cult, I guess, and now I'm like, but I don't have. It's like nihilism. It's exhausting after a while.
It is like a live record. It does the fact that it says it's a live record. I don't hinge my entire expectation on it based on if every single note was played live. If it sounds good and energetic and different from the studio record, like Unleashed in the East, I think is the best quote-unquote live record ever put out.
That's right. Live After Death is pretty close for me too, though. And I'm a big Decade of Aggression kind of guy.
It's a good record, but I don't know if it beats
because I think the reason I have so much connection to Decade of Aggression is because and this is sort of strange, but it was really hard to get a hold of some of those Metal Blade releases back in that day, unless you like knew where to find them
or special ordered or something.
Yeah, and so like as a ninth grader, that was like my first access to hearing Hell-Awaits and stuff like that for the first time, and I remember being like, where the hell do these songs come from? Because there was no internet. I couldn't just like Google Slayer and like get their back catalog. You kind of had to search around.
I think going back now, Live Undead's would rank up in there as well.
Sure.
That's a fun, fucking great.
But I think most of that was actually cheated as well.
Oh, that's fine, but it's different than the studio and the interplay with Tom and here's one for little cunts in the night kind of stuff is always great.
Although it's
like to spread their legs in the night.
It's hard to beat the if you see somebody go down, help a brother out.
Yes. I've played that for many people.
So.
Man, mosh pits are violent. No, listen to what Tom has to say about
it. Exactly. But these first two records, and I just looked it up too, Bjorn did the session vocals for Terror Propaganda as well.
Okay, so I think it's the same guy that goes through.
But I guess the aesthetic on these first two records and the sound, the thing you're going to hear on Total Soul Rape, which was their debut in 2000, and then as you just heard, Terror Propaganda in 2002. Obviously a huge Darkthrone influence we just mentioned, the sort of Mayhem Death Crush type stuff.
Thorn dissonance on guitars.
A lot of like industrial-ish kind of feel to it in the
like
way
sensibilities, how it's put together, not in the actual execution.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I don't know why I want to say that. Maybe it's like a post-apocalyptic kind of sound black metal. You know, well, it's not necessarily industrial.
Like Satyricon, Rebel Extravaganza had industrial elements to, I guess, how the thing was put together, how the songs were constructed.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's like when you listen to, like, say, Solemn 69 from Ministry, there's a bleakness that's there and a repetition.
An oppressiveness, too, yeah.
And like a riff quality, you know, that's like the riffs are fucking heavy, but yet, you know, like kind of samey in a weird way.
Yeah.
And that's what like Rebel Extravaganza does so well, I think, is reproduce like kind of a consistent, memorable like riff in each song. And I think these guys do a nice job of it. And I think one of the reasons it works so well is because of how well produced the stuff was. You know, like if it had just been like lo-fi grim black metal, I don't think this stuff like stands out as much.
No, because actually the songwriting, since it's produced fairly well, you can actually pick up a lot of like subtleties to the songwriting, and the stuff's actually like pretty brilliant. I think for it sounds a lot like stuff, but not exactly like stuff, which I think we probably say on every show.
Well, but I mean, like the next song we're gonna hear from Total Soul Rape, Death to Planet Earth. I mean, the soloing in it's not like you know, George Lynchian or anything like that, but it has like kind of an aesthetic of like what Slayer did in their early years, and like Trey did on like Altars, you know, where it's just like dive bombs and really chaotic.
And it's like something you don't really hear in black metal at all, except more contemporary Darkthrone stuff. They throw a little bit of solo-ish kind of stuff into the thing. But it's like played through like almost like they had those guys in mind when they're playing it, but it's not to that technical ability. It's much more open and rough and kind of we mentioned a lot of these songs actually have like a swing, like a jazz swing to the songs, but they're just, I think, a little bit it's almost like first take, kind of like rough. I love that kind of aesthetic to it as well, because you don't often hear bands that are this kind of raw but actually recorded well too.
Well, and I think too, like one of the other things is they're not afraid to go mid-pace or even slow and doomy. You know, like they you know, you heard it in a Blaze there, where there was like kind of a blazing like super fast intro, and then they sort of settle into this great Darkthrone meets Mayhem Death Crush kind of mid-pace riff for a while. They ride that out, and then in the end it like kind of got, you know, like they're experimenting with some ambience too, so you know, they're not afraid of like throwing kind of a couple of like weird ideas in. And in a song that we'll hear in this next set from Terror Propaganda, False Orders Begone, you know, you and I both point out, not only is like there a Gehenna like violent kind of weird vibe at the beginning, but then like it like the 210 mark, it settles into this weird like Catatonia, Brave Murder Day, For Funerals to Come type riff, you know, that's just, you know, nihilistic but like doomy at the same time, you know. And so I don't know, to me that's like refreshing, because like there's only so many Tremola, you know, like
hyper fast
Panzer Division Marduk type shit, where you know, like after a while, like kind of wears you out, you know.
Absolutely.
And especially coming out of Sweden, to hear something that was like, you know, I guess so neat. Like,
well, and these guys it's all about the fucking hooks.
Sure.
I mean, every single, no matter what song, there's a catchy breakdown in every single song.
Yeah. And even some of the drumming, like Reaktor 4, which we're going to hear off of Terror Propaganda, like you said, it like reminded you, the drumming was like hip hoppy almost. It's like something like you'd hear on like Deftones early records or something. Just
they're not afraid to like throw in weird stuff, but the way the production is, everything feels like it's, you know, it all has the same kind of it's seen through all the same lens, and kind of, you know, since that production's so fantastic, it just blends great.
And I think I would say that the first two records share a personality, just as I think Fuck the Universe and Void kind of share their own sort of, so there's almost like something that happens after Terror Propaganda, which we'll kind of talk about when we come back. But so let's check this stuff out. We've got a tune from Total Soul Rape, their debut, which we just said, Death to Planet Earth, which especially just the dive bomb leads and different things happening there are pretty awesome. Then we're going to jump back into Terror Propaganda with the aforementioned Reaktor 4. Listen for the great breakdown at the 240 mark too. It's kind of a beautiful, simple kind of song, but awesome things happening near the end. Then we'll go into False Orders Begone, which has that Catatonia riff. Pay attention to that. And then we'll come out and hear the first of some songs from Fuck the Universe with the title track. Hey, Mark, Fuck the Universe.
That's right. It's one of my favorite album titles ever.
Yeah, and before that, we heard False Orders Begone, Reaktor 4, and Death to Planet Earth. So all very nice songs.
Yes.
I think there's something thematic about Death to Planet Earth and Fuck the Universe there. So
I think it'd be total destruction of mankind and matter.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then, well, next we're going to be getting into Thorns in the Planet's Side. So,
which I think might be Kraft.
Yeah, that could be. It's almost like a Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote kind of relationship that Earth and Kraft have. So,
because the funny thing is that if Earth didn't exist, Kraft wouldn't exist.
I was going to say they wouldn't have a reason. They could have a recording studio to make these songs.
All kinds of existential shit happening here tonight on the Record Metal Podcast.
Yes, we're philosophical geniuses. In case you haven't noticed, our ability to process this stuff is beyond human reasoning.
We did a lot of bullshit college papers, so I think we can.
I took a philosophy class once. Actually, I took 2.
Oh wow!
Yeah, one was I fucking hated it.
Those classes are just to get girls, I've heard.
Yeah. Well, this class was way early in the morning. My only great memory of that class is when the teacher was so ignorant of what was happening within the confines of the class. There's probably 30 people in the class. That there was a guy that came to class drunk and started vomiting on himself in the back of the room. So everybody just got up and started walking out, and the teacher just kept talking the whole time, and he could clearly see the vomit. And which is very black metal in a way, it is vomiting in a philosophy class. So
fuck the college experience.
Yes, exactly. But things change on Fuck the Universe musically. I think. Lyrically, they're still kind of in that realm. I think I've read.
There's a 3-year gap too between records.
Yeah, and I've read a lot of people's reaction. They were sort of judging a book by its cover and expect it kind of the worst because they saw the cover, which is this sort of
it's a chaos symbol.
Yeah, the chaos symbol.
Yeah.
And then the title, Fuck the Universe, and then the fact they're on Southern Lord. And I think a lot of people thought, I
think it was licensed to Southern Lord. It was still that weird label that they did the first
Carnal,
2 on Carnal Records, I think, put those out. But
and so there was a lot of trepidation, I would say, to this record from and again, you and I didn't discover this in 2005, but from what I've read, that's the sort of vibe.
When I saw the cover and the title, it just seemed refreshing to me.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of neat, but I think people wanted things. We've talked often on this podcast about the conservativeness of especially the black metal genre on some level. Mm-hmm. It's weird that the fans are so conservative, and oftentimes it feels as if the musicians themselves are interested in electronic music, classical music, old rock and roll, symphonic classical, the things that like Arcturus would do, or any of the like Zollfeld and stuff like that. But it seems like a lot of the fans are like, no. Like, we want you here.
It's so weird because I don't want to hear the same band put out the same record every single time.
Yeah,
and I think it's more like what Darkthrone's doing with their whole, kind of reinventing themselves and taking all of their influences and putting them on their sleeve. That's more black metal than anything. It's saying like, fuck this genre. We almost single-handedly started this thing with a couple other bands.
Yeah,
the second wave of it, and what we know is modern black metal, and like you call your metal black, we call it lame and weak, as they say.
Well, and speaking of
too old, too cold,
of the sort of newer Darkthrone sound, I think that's influenced and informed a lot of what you hear on some of the stuff, especially with a song like "Fuck the Universe," kind of a black and roll kind of feel. Black metal and rock and roll sort of mixed together. It's much looser, much more open. Like you said, the swinging part that you heard in some of the songs really comes out, I think, on this record a lot. Again, the Satyricon, Rebel Extravaganza, Volcano kind of feel is there. King is the song that like informs a lot of this newer era of Kraft in a way.
Yeah, which I think King is a brilliant song, especially if you watch the video. It's like, how the fuck is this popular? Yeah, it's 2 dudes dressed up in corpse paint with chicks like dancing around them, singing about Satan. It's like, exactly. This is fantastic.
but then like you get to that riff right in the middle of King, that breakdown. It's just like, it's so perfect. It's all about the breakdown. And this record, by the way, was the number 32 of the top 100 records of the decade. So apparently we're not alone in loving this record. And but
this is a record I think that got a lot of people into Kraft, especially a lot of naysayers. I know a lot of people that have that are more into the for lack of a better word, the hipster metal scene, so they're kind of across the board, or the more weird avant-garde stuff. This got them in. This is one of those bands that it's okay to like. Same with like Watain and things like that.
which is strange. I mean, I can see why. I mean, they're very catchy, but I guess I always wonder where bands develop that sort of flavor of the month kind of reputation.
Well, I think they're on Southern Lord for one.
Yeah.
A name, like Fuck the Universe. Plus, Craft is a bizarre name for a black metal band. Anyways, I have no idea what the hell it even means. I couldn't really find anything about it. But Fuck the Universe is a very kind of in-your-face, blatant title.
It's almost like a punk record.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's really. Like Fuck Off and Die, but even more so. Like Fuck Everything Off and Die.
Yeah, no, and but yet, as simple as the music is, like in Fuck the Universe, like there are some like really cool transitions that happen, in the song, and like especially in the song.
I think it's deceptively simple, though. It's there's probably 2 or 3 riffs per song, but I think it takes a certain level of musicianship to actually craft no pun intended, craft a song that is simple. But still, like, incredibly catchy. You don't need anything else in it.
Well, and I think the other thing that's cool, too, about this record is they started on Terror Propaganda with, like, songs like 616, like, doing some instrumentals, which is, I don't know, that's not terribly common in black metal to do a lot of instrumentals, because it's...
Not that I can think of.
Other than maybe, like, some of the stuff like Burzum has done, at times, and I know Philosophy is, like, a big... I'd say a record that informed some of the aesthetics of this band too.
Oh, sure.
Terms of
especially the sound, like not even the sound, but the way the dissonance of the guitar. It's like a mix of Burzum and Thrones or something, and then Thorns.
Yeah,
Thrones. That's probably a band too.
Game of Thorns.
And then like Darkthrone and like actual approach and a little bit more rock and roll to it, which is I think is a really unique mix.
Well, and so you start hearing like they use a couple of instrumentals on this record, which is kind of cool. Like a song we're going to hear, in a moment, "Destroy All," is totally instrumental, and that I don't know. I can't really think of a lot of instrumental black metal bands. I guess
I want to say the Darkthrone's done one before, but is it on? Did they do one on Soulside?
Well, and that's not even really black metal, though.
Yeah, but it's Darkthrone.
I think they did actually. Now that you say that. Like isn't like and there might be something Cappadocia, wasn't that instrumental?
It might be.
Iconoclasm. I'm trying to remember like that era song titles.
Because I think there's one on Goat Lord too, but that was also supposed to be the the song between Ablaze and whatever. But so forget that.
But no, but I think it's one of the other unique aspects too. And this is like a time when like ISIS and the Pelican and some of that stuff's like blowing up. So maybe there's something like cult or hipster about doing, I don't know, instrumentals.
I really don't. The whole flavor of the month, I don't know how that necessarily happened. I mean, I think it's a mix of the media, the labels that the thing's on, and whoever's blogging about the thing too,
But the weird part is now...
It probably made it on like Pitchfork or something.
Yeah, that's true. Now that Void's come out, but I mean, that's like almost a 6 or 7 year gap, so I wonder if people like still have like kept up with them. You know what I mean? Like I wonder like...
Well, the record's been kind of anticipated, kind of the buzz I've got.
Probably because it's been 6 years.
Yeah, and it's been like written for a while, then was scrapped, and then there's been all this weird crap. And I think that at one point they thought about not putting it out.
Wow.
And I'm glad they did because it's a pretty fantastic record.
Yeah. And well, I don't want to jump into Void quite yet. I apologize, but the song we're going to hear next, "Thorns in the Planet Side," this is kind of I would say like the epic tune on the record. I mean, there's a couple of longer songs on this record. But, at 7.5 minutes, it's got a lot of different things happening for it. I
think if you had to pick one song on the record to sum up the entire record, I think it's this.
Yeah.
It kind of nails every angle of what they do kind of on this record.
Well, it's got, I don't know. It's got some of the dissonant stuff. It's got some of the, like, doomy Catatonia-esque stuff. It's got the Satyricon kind of stuff.
It's got a good breakdown. It's, the speed changes throughout the thing. It's almost... I think it almost sums up their entire career. Like, if this is one craft song to hear, here you go. This kind of shows everything they do.
Yeah, which is quite a statement. And then we've got Terni Exusta, which
Queen Despair.
Latin, probably.
I'm guessing it probably is.
Terni, Queen Despair, and that's a pretty happening tune as well. It swings. This is the song that like you and I both like really sort of noticed. The swinging kind of thing happening. There's
the hi-hats are really just kind of just kind of sizzle. And
there's some cool like like Watain-esque kind of riff rumbling kind of in the background that we sort of noticed.
Yeah, really subtle, kind of like a tremolo riff kind of underneath the thing.
And even I don't know, like maybe it's because it swings or what, but like I wrote down for this song that this is where I can start to hear, and I wouldn't say that Ministry is an influence, but I guess I link it to the industrial vibe you get without really being mechanical sounding, but just that sort of bleak post-apocalyptic sort of vibe that maybe the Godfleshes and Ministries had in the early 90s, So there's some, cool things happening there. And then the aforementioned instrumental Destroy All, which is cool because like you don't hear this very often, but like, total death metal beginning almost, in terms of the riff stuff. With some Paul Mute kind of things.
Which we don't really hear that much on this record. Actually, as Fuck the Universe kind of, as it goes throughout the record, as it plays out, you get a little bit more Paul Muting in it. But that's really nothing they experimented with that much in the previous records or on Void.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this is where you said they kind of become akin with another, I guess, Swedish black metal band that's kind of hard to sort of pigeonhole in terms of where they are sonically, and that's Dissection.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
There's a lot of Dissection kind of riffing happening in Destroy All as well.
Because early Dissection, for those who don't know, it was definitely a hybrid of black metal and thrash put together. Yeah. And they're kind of grabbing a little bit of this, but this is also, I'd actually like to do a show just about Rankos, that Dissection record, because after, it's, I don't know when that thing came out,
2006, I think 2005 or 2006.
Yeah, I think 2002 or 2003.
No, because I was teaching, and I remember running to it with Luke at Stony Creek.
Maybe it's 4 then, because I was still working at the record store at that point.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely was down here when it came out. I do.
But yeah, that record's got a lot more going on than I think people really. And then looking back now at like what it basically influenced the whole direction of Wu-Tang.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of like a revered record. I was reading an interview with Daniel from Wu-Tang talking about how important that record is. Which is kind of funny because everybody kind of panned it at the time.
And I liked it well enough. I mean, I got into a few songs.
It's like Star Wars trilogy, the prequels or whatever, the sequels, you had such a high expectation for this record after, 11 years or something after the last one came out.
It was inevitably going to be some level of, a letdown. And like,
But after the suicide and everything as well, I think it's much more poignant and actually is a predictor of his death.
Well, and I think it's a false expectation to imagine that, like, as a musician, that like they froze themselves in time and that they were going to emerge exactly the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, even the newer Burzum stuff has its like own different vibe. It's not like right where Philosophy left off, where those last 2 Burzums have kind of come out.
Yeah. So like with him, he had the kind of shit couple albums of this, piano stuff that was all completely white music with no, evil black influence
exactly.
to it or whatever.
Yeah.
But
free of the blues roots.
Pesky Robert Johnson crap.
Because that guy wasn't evil in his own right. But yeah, Destroy All with the Dissection stuff also has the tremola actually does show up a little bit in this, but it kind of psychedelic kind of way of playing, and then great like kind of early Morbid Angel type solo at the end. And then we're gonna get into a pair of Void tunes, and we've already sort of hinted at some of the stuff with Void, but we'll talk a little bit more about this record when we come back. But so we've got Thorns in the Planet Side, Terni, Exusta, Queen Despair, Destroy All, and then from Void, Succumb to Sin, and very subtle tune called I Want to Commit Murder.
And I guarantee you do not have that stuck in your head.
Commit Murder, Succumb to Sin, Destroy All, Terni, Exusta, Queen Despair, and then we start with Thorns in the Planet's Side. I Want to Commit Murder. That's one of your favorites of the holiday season.
I enjoy that. It's and it's got a lot to do. I think it's very similar. Which a band I think we should do a show eventually on is Gehenna. The Norwegian Gehenna.
Without a doubt.
Just the kind of bludgeoning.
They have a record called Murder. And then the cover of Admirian Black, like I could stare at that forever. It just creeps me out to no end.
That's a black metal band that it came out kind of in the era of Dimmu Borgers and a lot of this symphonic shit. But actually, like, encapsulate an atmosphere that there's few bands that are as eerie as Gehenna. Yeah. And just like it's almost the soundtrack to Murder.
Yeah, and what's the song that's on Admirian Black that just unnerves me? Is it Hate Work? Or no, that's a Morbid Angel song from Domination. It's track 5 or whatever. It's the highlight of that whole record. It's very like...
I mean, that whole record's pretty bludgeoning, too, and kind of not necessarily real easy listening music, but the first couple, First Spell, Second Spell, and then Seen Through the Veil are all fantastic. And Malice.
Malice is sweet, too.
Great records. I highly recommend people checking those things out.
And Admirian Black was one of the 40 records or 40 CDs that I took to Italy with me for 6 months when I was living there. So it was like a record that I was like, I don't know, along with like Tonight's Decision and Still Life from Opeth. And so that whole group of records that I only could listen to for 6 months still kind of holds some good weight with me.
Yeah.
But I Want to Commit to Murder. It's got, like you said, a Gehenna. I mean, it's very like in your face.
It's very repetitive, but it's also. I mean, that's the one. Like after I listen to Void, that verse is just stuck in my head constantly. It's insane.
Yeah, and then Succumb to Sin. There's some cool things happening there. Kind of Watain meets Satyricon, kind of the best of these two different kind of black metal styles, the tremola Swedish style, and then
But the production, I think, is decidedly different on this record as compared to Fuck the Universe. I mean, we've got the drums are a little bit more buried in a little bit of I think like some gain and reverb and kind of pushed back in the mix because they're electronic drums. But the whole thing's got much more of almost like this kind of like it's like throwing a wet blanket on top of the thing, and it has this everything's kind of, or maybe that's not a good descriptor of it, but everything feels a little bit more cohesive and I guess not as dynamic in the production. Everything, it's more of kind of has like this kind of like veil of fuzz over the top of it or something.
The distortion, if that makes sense. Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. And yet there's some very memorable riffs that sort of emerge out of the chaos of that. I heard an obscure peaceful band Charger riff in this song. Again, Dissection makes a little appearance here, and then even a Bolt Thrower kind of riff. Like
a little bit of palm muted breakdown.
Yeah, pretty awesome. And then speaking of awesome lyrics, this is the song we pulled a couple cool lyrics out of. Transgressions get things done, which is, I think, should be on a t-shirt.
Or a tattoo.
And morality is significant like sound and vacuum. So fuck you, morality.
So fuck the universe.
Fuck you, universe, and fuck you, planet Earth. I mean, I think that just sums up those guys, in a really nice way. So, but Void's a cool record, and I think it will.
It's gotten good press so far.
Yeah, I haven't seen it show up a lot in a lot of American kind of stuff. Like I don't think Decibels even mentioned it, which seems strange.
It just came out
September. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of surprised it didn't make it in there.
I know, but it's kind of weird. Decibel, if you're listening,
shame on you.
Yeah, Craft, come on, man.
Come on, we need some more black metal.
Yes, we do. Good black metal for sure. But so I mean, I think Void. If you've been a person that was into Fuck the Universe and maybe just forgot that this band was kind of
it's easy
stuff,
since it was 6 years after the fact.
So we're here to tell you that Void holds up. Avoid the controversy surrounding it because of the drums and stuff like that. Because I think I barely even noticed until you said something about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, if anything, like in the song we're going to end with, "Come Resonance of Doom," the drums like kind of give it more of a rock. Indie rock kind of vibe at times to it, because it's like, I don't know if it's the looseness of it, but it just doesn't sort of fit the standard kind of qualities that you would expect from black metal.
The constant blasting, and I mean the drums are a little different as far as like in Fuck the Universe and their previous records. There's a little bit of, they leave the mistakes in. Sometimes he's a little bit off, or he hits like a weird beat where I mean, I guess he can. It's still in time to some degree, but it's still just a weird choice.
Well, there was stuff like on Terror Propaganda where he was almost like behind the beat for a second, but almost like on purpose.
Would catch up. Yeah. So he did weird choices, which you don't. It's a little bit more straightforward on Void, but still, I enjoy it wholeheartedly.
Absolutely. And the song we're going to end with, for me, is as catchy as I Want to Commit Murder is. This for me, I think, is my favorite song so far on Void, and it's Come Resonance of Doom, which is a kind of a badass title. I mean, it sounds like something you'd see like on our Electric Wizard record,
And just the opening riff, I mean, it sounds like it's almost being distorted by the gravity of a vacuum or something, pulling it into it has a really kind of bizarre, eerie quality to it.
Sure. And just to show like the diversity of a band like this, like at the 140 mark, you go from a Catatonia Discouraged One riff into a Disrupt riff, like just total like grind,
discharge even.
Yeah, discharge type thing, to this weird like kickstart my heart like thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, as you said, a kind of a galloping go to war type riff, and it all happens in the span of about like 15 or 20 seconds. And I mean, that's pretty sweet for black metal bands in nowadays, especially one that still maintains an ounce of sort of street cred, which they do. I mean,
they still have more in common with the first wave, or I guess the second wave of black metal, the Burzums, Darkthrones, all that, as opposed to like the orthodox stuff like Deathspell Omega, and Funeral Mist, which are a little bit more kind of heady and or more about noise and chaos.
Well, and I think, like I said, the bridging off point was Fuck the Universe. They decided to go in this direction, and I think the orthodox bands kind of proceeded to sort of go in that grim kind of direction that they may have been kind of part of with Total Soul Rape and Terror Propaganda, but not musically, not anymore. So, but let us know what you thought. I mean, this is maybe a curveball for some of you who are expecting.
Well, we did go back to Sweden.
We did.
Sorry, everybody,
but we wanted to do black metal, so we're not doing Swedish death metal.
The funny thing is that I think black metal, time and again, will come. It always seems to be the innovator. Yeah, which is funny because like there's not a whole lot of like death metal innovators anymore. It seems.
No, if anything, you almost want death metal to like not innovate. Sometimes you want. Like I think some of the bands like I care about the most about. Well,
like just come on, go back a couple years.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like go back and sound like Stockholm 1990, 1989. Yeah. That's.
But we've got that whole wave of stuff that's sounding like that. But I think black metal lends itself in a bizarre way to kind of be more relevant, and more flexible as far as its approach.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and that's a good closing thought. So let us know what you thought of Void and Craft and their back catalog and stuff. Shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Facebook, Mark and Jason. Leave us a review, star ratings and stuff on iTunes, and check out the website, requiempodcast.com, where what can they find on this wonderful website?
You can become an executive producer of the show, which is very helpful. You can also pre-order a copy of my graphic novel, Begone, the H.P. Lovecraft adaptation.
Speaking of misanthropic bleakness.
It's very bleak. Yeah. This might, Fuck the Universe might be a good soundtrack to that book. Go. But if you like comics, if you like horror, I would recommend checking that out at requiempodcast.com.
Absolutely. And we like hearing your thoughts, and if you have requests and different things that you think we should delve into. It's always cool to sort of float that stuff around. Sometimes we can address that. Sometimes it's a band we're completely not familiar with, and we would hate to piss all over that band by stumbling through it. But so anyways, for Craft and Void, Come Resonance of Doom, I'm Jason.
And I'm Mark.